You're back with the lawn engineer, and we're going to do a major service on our 2017 Chrysler Pacifica. As I said, the Chrysler Pacifica is a 2017, so that's nearing 6 years old now with 80,000 miles. And I've got my fluids lined up here for the service I'm going to do today. I'm going to break this service up into 3 separate videos because what we have going on is a coolant flush and change, a oil change, and then a transmission fluid drain and refill. So I'm going to be doing the 3 big fluid changes: the coolant, the engine oil, and the transmission fluids. What the first thing we need to do is get this thing jacked up, supported with jack stands properly, and remove the belly pan. On a normal oil change, I would not do that. It's not necessary. There's a little door there that flaps down. But to access the coolant, to drain and flush the coolant, we need that belly pan off, and to access the transmission drain, we need it off also. So we're just going to take that off first thing and get it out of the way. We're up on jack stands. The next thing we have to do is take off the underbelly pan, which is a pretty big molded piece. I'll show you what that looks like. All right, underneath here, it is this kind of felt carpet material. We've got bolts up front here. We've got a couple plastic rivets. We've got other bolts to take out. So basically we've got to take all of these pieces out. The best thing that works for that is a little impact with the socket. We'll zip all those out and pop those plastic rivets out and get this big piece out of here. On the plastic rivets, what you want to do is pop out this center piece. You pry that out, and then the whole piece is able to come out. All right, so to get this bad boy out, you've got 3 of those plastic rivets, 4 screws, bolt screw thing that you need an 8mm socket for. Then you've got 12 of these bolts that require a 10mm socket. After you get all those things out, she slides right out of place. Kind of a pain in the butt, but it does keep everything nice and tidy underneath, and supposedly helps with aerodynamics. Now with that belly pan removed, we can come underneath. We see we've got great access to our transmission and our engine. However, our radiator is still hidden by this front piece, so we got to take this piece of black plastic off just in back of the front bumper. It's the same type of fastening system with these bolts that require a 10mm socket, and then a few on the side here that require that 8mm. So we'll pop off. Looks like we've got 3 here, and then we've got these larger 10mm socket ones across the front. Looks like 4 of those. The bumper to this piece. All right, with that front piece removed, now we've got some more access directly below the radiator. So the radiator is here, and we've got our coolant line right here. So there's a nice metal piece just below the radiator, which is going to be our low spot where we're going to drain from. So most radiators now, you know, old school radiators always had a petcock in the bottom where you could drain the system down. That just usually does not exist anymore. So we're going to have to probably pop off this line here and drain the system down. That'll be a good place to try to make the least amount of mess. For our coolant change, we want to drain it first underneath. So you got to get yourself a bucket or a large pan To catch all this stuff, it is an environmental issue if you let it get away and go down drains or into the road. You don't want to do that. You want to capture it all. So I've got this bucket, fits underneath. We'll drain into this. All right, we're back underneath the van. And here is that metal part. That's the bottom of the cooling system. This is the small hose we're going to deal with. It's the most easily accessible clamp and hose, and it's at the lowest point of the system, so this one will be the easiest to drain from. All right, we got disconnected on the low point. We're draining the old coolant out of the system. In the old days, the flush came from, there'd be an attachment for your garden hose in one of the heater hoses that you could hook a water source right up to that and run it through the system and discharge that out, mostly onto the road or your driveway and then go into sewers. We're not gonna do that for the obvious environmental implications of that. What we can do, we got to capture it all, so I'm going to add a little bit of water into the cooling system until it starts running clear into our bucket. Then we're going to put that hose back on, and I'm going to fill the system up with water and run it for a while, circulate that, and then dump that, capture all that, then seal the system back up and add our fresh new coolant water mix. For adding water or coolant into your system, normally you'd go right to your radiator cap and fill that. Normally these expansion tanks are just that, for expansion. They won't actually fill the system until it goes through a heat cycle. But this particular example on the Pacifica, there is no access to the radiator itself. It is all through this tank, and we've got a larger hose on the bottom here that then fills the system. And we've got our overflow and expansion lines up here. So we'll add some water right into this. And you can tell by the style of cap on this tank, this is part of the pressurized system. And just by taking that off, vented the system, and the final bit of fluid in the system just drained there. But we're just going to take our hose and we can hear that below draining into our bucket, and we can see we've got some clear water coming out. Here is our bucket of coolant. A little bit dirty. We're only at 80,000 miles, and this is 2017, so going on 6 years. Now I'm going to put that hose back on. We'll fill the system up with water, run the engine for a while. That way the water pump will circulate the system. Hopefully we can get it up to temperature. The thermostat will open. That water will flow through the heater core and other elements in the system, and that will be our flush. Then we'll drain that, capture it obviously, and then we'll add our new coolant in it. While you're filling this, you'll notice bubbles come up here as this water or new coolant flows back into the system. One of the ways we can accelerate this process is by starting the engine and having the water pump turning and moving that fluid around. It should suck it into the system. So we're going to go ahead and fire this up. That way we can get the water pumping around and accelerate this process. We've been running for a few minutes here, and I can tell the coolant is getting mixed up good with that water we introduced into the system. We can see we're getting a pretty red color back. We're getting that red color back in the coolant. It's mixing with that water we added. And I just heard the thermostat open up. You can tell it sucked in some more. So we'll just run it a few more minutes to mix things up a little bit more, and then we'll drain the system again. After draining the water, we get that half full, 3/4 full bucket of water coolant mix. Our tank is empty, and it's time to add our full coolant now. I'm wet on my back because I wet the floor down. Inevitably, you're gonna get some splashing, no matter how hard you try when you drain it. So I just wet the floor down to prevent any staining of the concrete. That means I have to lay in it to put the hose back on, but it's worth it. I don't want my concrete all stained up. I opted for the concentrate. It's less bulk, a little bit cheaper than the pre-diluted stuff, so we have to dilute it ourselves. What we want is 50% coolant, 50% water, so I've got a small mixing cup here that I'll just use to measure out. Then we'll dump it in the tank. It's a little bit slow going, waiting for all the bubbles to come out of the system, so I'm gonna work on putting that shroud back on and the belly pan underneath while I double team this. I have the underbelly back on. Now I'm really wet from laying on a wet floor. We're just above the fill line. I'm gonna run it, get that circulating through the system, make sure to top it off, and let those bubbles come out. We're going to put the cap on, take it for a short drive, let it go through a heat cycle, and then check it again. As that's going through the system, water pump's moving it around. So we'll just watch that for a while and just keep adding to make sure it stays at the full mark. I just went for a drive, and our level is right at our max. So I think we are good to go on the coolant change.